Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Trident University Marketing Specialist Daniel Sloan, and we're excited to be bringing you today's Culture of Research and Education webinar titled Publishing in the Academic World. The core webinar series is designed to provide faculty, students, and alumni an opportunity to share their research and scholarship with the Trident community. By fostering a culture of professional development and idea exchange, participants will have access to a valuable forum for lifelong learning. This university-wide effort is led by Trident's Doctoral Studies Directors. A few notes before we begin today's session. Please feel free to ask any questions and share your experiences with today's subject matter. Although all participants are muted, we will have time for questions and answers at the end of the session. You can submit them on your control panel, the question box about halfway down, or you can email me directly at daniel.sloan@trident.edu. Email address is on the screen for you now. This webinar will be recorded, and all attendees will receive a link to this webinar and a copy of the slides later this week. Today's session will be hosted by Dr. Indira Guzman, Doctoral Studies Director of the PhD in Business Program in Trident's Glenn R. Jones College of Business. Dr. Guzman joined Trident in 2006. In addition to her current role, she has held positions of Coordinating Assistant and Associate Professor and Program Director for Computer Science and Information Technology Management for the undergraduate and graduate programs. She holds a PhD in Information Science and Technology and a master's degree in Information Management from Syracuse University. She received a bachelor's and a master's degree in Computer Science from Donetsk National Technical University in Ukraine. Dr. Guzman has published in academic journals such as the Database for Advances in Information Systems, Information Technology and People, Human Resource Management, and Women's Studies. She is a Fulbright alumnus and an active member of the Association of Information Systems, the Association of Computing Machinery, ACM Sigmus, Computers and People Research, the Institute for Certification of Computing Professionals, ISACA, and the National Center of Women in IT. Her research areas of interest include the impact of IT in organizations, IT occupational culture, IT workforce, IT security workforce, information security auditing, business intelligence, and performance assessment in higher online education. Welcome, Dr. Guzman. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for the introduction. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. Today, we have Dr. Shackman and Dr. San, both faculty members of our College of Business, who have been working with doctoral students for many years, have been successful publishing in academia. We are honored to have them here in this panel about publishing in the academic world. I'm going to start introducing Dr. Shackman. Dr. Shackman currently serves as the Department Chair of Finance, Economics, and Accounting in the Glenn R. Jones College of Business at Trident University. He has taught at Trident since 2001. His areas of expertise include economics, finance, international business, cross-cultural management, and quantitative methods. He received his PhD in economics from the University of California, Los Angeles, and a bachelor's from University of Michigan. Dr. Shackman has published in several journals, such as the Economic Modeling, Management International Review, Kytos, and the Journal of Financial Services Research. He has also presented papers at the Academy of International Business, the Academy of Management, and the European Academy of Management. Dr. Shin San is the Department Chair of Marketing, Logistics, and Operations Management at Glenn R. Jones College of Business at Trident. She has taught at Trident since 2007, and her research includes country branding, country of origin image, cross-cultural marketing, teaching innovation, business ethics, electronic word of mouth, online search behavior and advertising, mobile marketing, and social media marketing. She received a PhD in marketing from the University of North Texas, an MBA from Cal State University Dominguez Hills, and a bachelor's degree from Beijing Normal University. Dr. San's research has been published in peer-reviewed journals such as Journal of Global Marketing, Marketing Education Review, Journal of Consumer Marketing, Journal of Brand Management, Journal of Consumer Behavior, Journal of Education for Business, and the Journal of Electronic Commerce Research. She also serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Asia Business Studies and Journal of Global Marketing. Again, thank you very much both for participating and being part of this panel, and thank you everyone for joining. To start the topic, we are going to discuss what is the purpose of publishing in academic journals. We are going to discuss also the differences between the target of publication, rankings, and impact factors, some predatory journals and how to avoid them, and the process of publishing, covering things like the peer review process, collaboration and authorship, and the next steps for publication. As stated, the first topic is the purpose of publishing in academic journals. Well, I think the main definition is to just recognize that publishing in academic journals is a formal recognition of a contribution to knowledge by the peers in the area of research. All journal publications are reviewed by peers in the field. As you know, when a student receives a degree in a PhD degree or a doctoral degree in a university, the dissertation is approved by the committee members and the chair, and in our program, the program director and the dean. So there's a university community and some external reviewers that approve the dissertation for publication, and the student receives a diploma. However, when a research is published in an academic journal, it means that the peer review, the peers who have been conducting research in the field recognize that that publication and that research is a contribution to knowledge. So that's why it's important to publish when research has been conducted, and because it's another way of validation, and it also shows the ability to of the authors to push the boundaries and of what is currently known. It also shows their ability to synthesize knowledge. In the following up with the purpose of publishing academic research, depending on where students, where graduates are going after completing a doctoral degree, publication records are very important in academic world, in academic jobs. So some academics say, like in this case, Combs says that writing a dissertation without a publication is like going to the trouble of making a cake but not baking it. Again, this is related to the contribution to knowledge and the recognition from the community. It's also a way to make the society, the academic society, benefit from all the hard work that a researcher and a doctoral student conducts. And some people even say without a publication, the dissertation is not technically a total success. Again, that's an interesting statement, but it tells you how the academic world, and again, for an academic job, those are the expectations. Some positions, academic positions, will explicitly require publication records before hiring. And because of that, many graduates from doctoral programs work on publications and of course to make them more competitive. Next slide, please. Now, when we talk about publications, you know, publications are, it's a very general term, so we need to think about the target. Academic publications can be done in conferences, and those are, there are different kinds of conferences. Publishing in conferences has advantages and disadvantages. For example, I'm sorry about the background noise. Okay, so as I was saying, I apologize for that. The publishing in a conference is it's a good opportunity to let others know about your research, and it has some important pros. For example, it's very good for networking, since in a conference one can meet other peers that are working in the same type of research. It's another opportunity to receive feedback from the peers, because usually in conferences you submit a paper and the paper is receives a review from peers, and it's a blind review, so you don't know who completed the review. But that review is important because it provides feedback to continue the improvement of the research. So the authors can use that feedback to improve the paper, improve the research, and continue with the work. So those are some of the advantages of participating in conferences. On the other hand, conferences, depending on where they are, traveling could become very expensive. But at the same time, conferences require registration fees. Some conferences are more expensive than others, so therefore you need a budget for attending the conferences. But again, you know, some authors plan that strategically in a way that you can participate in a conference that is closer to where you live, and at the same time co-authorship helps, because only one of the authors needs to attend the conference. Another potential target for publication could be book chapters. Now, book chapters could be also a good starting point. They are usually not academic. They are not academic journals. Book chapters are usually just sections about a topic, so they are specific about one topic. And the prestige of a publication in a book chapter depends on the publisher. And finally, we're going to talk about the journals, which are the typical traditional academic publications, but they can also be practitioner publications. But our focus for today is going to be the academic publications. And we're going to talk about how publishing in journals could be, is usually more prestigious, but again depends on the rankings of the journal, and they could also take a long time to be published. So Dr. Shackman is going to talk to us a little bit more about that that process and those factors that make differentiations between journals.
Okay, so for those of you from your classes, when you look up journal articles in ProQuest or EBSCO, you probably know that all the journals probably have similar names, and it may be hard to tell which ones are more prestigious than each other. For example, if you're in business, you see there's a lot of journals have very similar names: Journal of Management, Journal of Management Studies, Academy of Management Journal. But even though they sound similar, if you're actually in that discipline, these journals have a very, very wide range of prestige and difficulty of getting accepted. The very top journals in a given discipline typically accept less than 10% of the papers, and The ones they reject, over 90% that they reject, they're often from leading experts in that discipline or from a top tier Ivy League university. So this is really at the very top. It's really, really competitive, just like this diagram shows. If you're at a research-oriented university, that's where the term publish or perish comes from. It doesn't mean you have to publish anywhere at a publish or perish university. It means you got to publish in the very, very top. Of course, there's a very wide range, and just because we say it's A list, B list, C list, even a C list journal might only accept half the papers, and it still might be quite a long ordeal. But I mean, the key thing when you find a target journal, you have to look at the actual prestige, because you want to know, how long, what your chances are of it getting published, how long it might take you to get published. The very top journals, even if you're one among the 10% or fewer that get a chance to be accepted, you typically have to rewrite it several times before the final version is accepted for publication. So as I mentioned before, the names might sound fairly similar. So you might be wondering, how can you tell, what the prestige level is? But there are several key ways that we can find out how they're ranked. So we'll get now into one of the main ways that journals are ranked. This is called the impact factor. If you go to the homepage of most journals, it will mention its impact factor. It's just a number, but this is based primarily on how often articles in that journal are cited by other researchers and other journal articles. The formal computation is the total number of times an article in a journal have been cited during the previous 2 years, and the total number of articles published in that journal. So getting a paper cited, that's kind of a crude, rough measure of how widely accepted or how much attention a paper is given. If the paper is really groundbreaking or really, really interesting to a lot of other researchers, it should get cited. Other researchers, when they publish, should be citing this paper. So it's a fairly crude measure, but the nice thing about it is it gives you a quick number. 5 is generally considered a pretty good number. 2 or 3 isn't bad. Even above 1, it can be decent. So this is just one way of getting a rough idea of how prestigious a given journal is. So let's get into some other ways to find out how a journal, how to find out how prestigious a journal is or where it's ranked. So, for many of us, you don't necessarily need to publish in an A+ listed journal, and you don't need to, try to compete with Ivy League professors in terms of getting into a journal. At the same time, you want to make sure it meets, at least a solid measure of being reputable. So one such source is Cabell's Directory of Publishing Opportunities. Cabell's doesn't rank journals, but if they list them as a publishing opportunity, it means that they've investigated the journal and it meets some minimal standard of credibility, that it's a real journal published by real academics, and they have some kind of standard for reviewing papers and deciding, of having some decent quality control. So, but again, that's just the minimum, really. I mean, some are very easy to get into, some are very, very tough, but it's kind of a minimal seal of approval you want to make sure the journal you submit to has. Part of our problem with finding how prestigious a journal is that every academic discipline has their own list and own criteria. If you're in that discipline, if you've been teaching in there a long time, or by the time you finish a PhD in a specific discipline, you probably know what by reputation at least, what are the top ranking journals. But there's many disciplines have their own specific list that are a general measure of how prestigious that journal is within a specific discipline. Example, if you're in health science, the top journals might be New England Journal of Medicine or Journal of the American Medical Association. If you're in business, Dr. Anwil Harzing at harzing.com has a really comprehensive list of rankings of business journals. And she uses many, many different sources. Like, for example, a lot of business schools or associations of business school deans come up with rankings. Dr. Harzing has all those on her webpage. It's very, very comprehensive. For those of you who are not in business, you can check out for your own discipline on sources such as SciMago or Google Scholar. They both have rankings of journals in every discipline and also many, many subdisciplines. So say you're in business, you can look at the business journal rankings, but you can also look at specifically finance, marketing, accounting. So these are very, very useful tools, and they use things like the impact factor that we discussed. There's another one they use called H-index, which is also based on citations, but it's a lot more complicated measure. So this slide just giving you a screenshot from SciMago. As you can see, it gives you menu options to choose the main subject area. Business management and accounting is what, this is my area, so I picked this one. It also has you can also narrow it down even further if you want. If you want to look at just finance, just marketing, just management, you can do that. You can also do it by country. But we see here the top journals here. Journal of Finance, top 3 are finance journals. These are really, really, really tough to get into, very brutal. Even if you get in, you have to rewrite it and rewrite it 2 or 3 times at least before it gets published. Anything published by the Academy of Management is really prestigious. The Academy of Management Review, Academy of Management Journal, some other ones, Strategic Management Journal or Journal of Management. For those of you who are in business, probably you've come across several articles. We include a lot of those in the class. But of course, if you switch it to something else, if you switch it to health science, to education, you'll get a much different list. But that's kind of the beauty of these web pages, and you can get a quick, for whatever your discipline is, you can narrow down and focus and see what are the top rated journals within that discipline. Okay, so we also have to look at the other end, the disreputable journals. It used to be all journals were published in print version, primarily by print, and you could order, you get a subscription, you could get actual journals in the mail, or go to the library and see the actual print version. Of course, all journals now also have online versions, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's a good thing. It makes it much, much easier to be a PhD student if you can easily see all the articles, find them all online. Where the problem comes, there's more and more journals, new journals, that are available only online. Now, there's nothing wrong with that per se. Some of these are still very credible and still have a solid ranking. But the fact that anybody can start up their own journal without really any cost, just the cost of hosting a web page, means that there's a lot of scams out there. A lot of these are not really journals at all. It's somebody, maybe in a third world country, in their basement, they decide to come up with a journal that sounds very reputable. Like I mentioned, most of the journals have very similar sounding names. So it's very easy to fall to these kind of scams. They accept almost any paper, so that's kind of the advantage. If you need something on your Vita really quick, you can submit and it'll get accepted, but they also charge very, very large fees. And a bigger problem, is just you don't want to be associated with some scam. It's like putting, you can put it on your Vita and make it look impressive, but it's just like having a degree from a diploma mill on your Vita. It might look impressive at first to an employer, but if they dig deeper and they find out that school is a scam, the same with journals. You could pack your Vita with a whole bunch of scam journals, and you might get an interview, but at a later stage, if there's an investigation, they look at your actual publications and where they're published, they'll find out, it reflects very poorly on you, and plus, you have to pay a very large fee. So, how can we avoid this kind of these kind of journals? Well, there's one way. I didn't put it on the slide, but if you want to have some fun, you can try writing up a really bad paper, throw something together, or have there's even web pages where they can automatically generate some random sentences. Submit a really bad paper, put a ridiculous sounding fake name and submit. And if it gets accepted for publication the next day or two, it's a pretty good bet it's a scam journal. But one thing though is you might have already started getting spam email. Doctoral students, especially once you graduate, once your dissertation's published in ProQuest, first thing you might immediately start getting solicitations from predatory journals. I get so many every day from spam email, not just for journals. There's also kind of scam conferences as well. If you're getting a spam email, it's a pretty good red flag that it's probably not the best journal to submit to, because a top reputable journal does not have to send out spam email. It's like I mentioned, to get an academic job or to be promoted to get tenure, you need to publish in decent journals. So any reputable journal gets plenty of submissions. They don't need to send out spam emails to any faculty or doctoral student email address they can get their hands on. So getting a spam email is a pretty good red flag. Another step, there's a librarian named Jeffrey Beal. He used to publish until recently a list of predatory journals. If it's on that list, it's a pretty good bet to avoid publishing there. He doesn't publish it anymore, but Cabell's directory, you want to make sure, if it's in Cabell's directory, it's probably not a predatory journal. And Cabell's is planning on picking up the work of Jeffrey Beal. They are planning on printing up a list of journals to avoid that are predatory in nature. So that should be out later this year. I think Dr. Guzman earlier mentioned that most journals are free, and I also mentioned that predatory journals can charge a lot of money. So I think it's worth clarifying the cost structure. Most high-quality journals do not charge any fees. If they're high quality, they can make plenty of money through libraries. So whether it's physical subscription that academics buy, a professor might buy a subscription to a journal, or a library purchases a subscription. If it's a top journal, libraries will want a subscription. So that's primarily where they get the good journals get their money from, and they don't charge any fees. One of the few exceptions are in the disciplines of finance and accounting and some economics journals. They do charge money just to be considered. So the fee can be $50 to $300. Not all top journals in finance and accounting charge, but a lot of them do. This is not a predatory practice or way of making money. It's just because they are so competitive, they get so many submissions that they don't want to waste time. They don't want to look at some poor quality papers. So by charging some money, say by charging $300, they want to make sure that before you submit that you've really put your time and effort into it. That you're not wasting your time by submitting a paper that's not ready to be considered. But this is a normal practice. If they charge money before just to be considered, it's usually the mark of a higher quality journal, not of a predatory journal. Where you have to be wary of if the journal, it's free to submit, but you only have to pay if they accept. So this is a problem because, you know, journals, the prestige depends in part on how selective they are in choosing articles to publish. But if they only make money if they accept your paper, it means they're probably going to be very, very lenient. So almost all predatory journals operate under this system. And, you know, the fee can be $1,000 or more. And you really have to be very, very wary if they they have this model. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're not reputable, but it's a huge red flag if they have this kind of pricing structure. So I think Dr. Sun's now going to get into the whole process of peer review once you submit a journal, how this system works.
Thanks, Dr. Shackman. Here I will discuss why we need to do peer review in academia and give you a general overview of peer review process. The major purpose of peer review is to make sure the academic studies has been done in appropriate ways, and there is no potential plagiarism or other ethical issues related to the specific research project. For the peer review process, I will first discuss the process for a journal. When a writer or author submits the paper to a journal, the editor-in-chief will first review the paper and make sure the paper match the scope of the journal and have some interest to the readers of the journal. If the editor-in-chief thinks the paper or manuscript does not match the scope of the journal or has poor quality, the paper will be rejected. And in this sense, there is no peer review process involved. And we call it desk rejection. Only after the editor-in-chief thinks the paper has potential publication, it will be signed to an associate editor. And the associate editor will find appropriate reviewers who has expertise on the topics of the paper to review the manuscript. And after the review, reviewers get back the feedback, the associate editors will make recommendations on the paper and discuss it with the editor-in-chief. And there are usually 4 types of decisions for the journal review. One is rejection. The second one is acceptance, which is very rare for the first reviews. And the third one is major revision. And the fourth one is minor revision. If the paper receives the suggestion or recommendation of major revision or minor revision, the authors will have the opportunity to refine and improve the paper based on the reviewers' comments and get the paper published in the journal maybe after 2 or more rounds of reviews. For the peer review process in the conference, it's kind of different because for the conference, there are only 2 review decisions. One is rejection, the other is the acceptances. So the journal, if the reviewers recommend to reject the paper, it's likely the paper will be rejected without the potential to revise and improve the paper to resubmit it to the conference. So that's the major difference between peer review process in journal and the peer review process in conference. During the peer review process, the critical review from the reviewers is very important to ensure the quality of the research. The critical review means that the reviewers not only discuss the value of the papers and the potential flaws or issues of the papers, but also provide constructive comments on how to improve the papers. For example, the reviewers who provide the constructive feedback may list additional readings for the authors to improve their literature reviews, or provide additional suggestions on how to improve the data analysis. After the writers or authors receive the feedback from the editors, they will think about how to respond the review comments in an effective way. Based on my own experience, I would suggest that when we have some recommendation to revise the manuscript for journal publication, the first thing is to read the comments from both reviewers and get a sense of the major issues as mentioned by both reviewers. Then we can highlight or classify the common issues mentioned by both reviewers, because those common issues are the major issues the manuscript has, and the author should focus more on those issues to refine the paper. And some comments are made related to the structure of the manuscript with respect to the journal requirement or the citation issues. That is many minor. And sometimes the reviewers have conflicting comments on a specific issues. So the authors have to make their own decision on how to address this kind of conflicting comments from two reviewers. And it's the author's own judgment in that sense to make arguments how to improve the paper, or if the reviewer appropriate comment regarding a specific issues. Then the writers need to have a written feedback or written response to each of the reviewers' comments and explain what has been done to address each review comments and improve the paper. So this peer review process is a tedious and iterative process to ensure the paper has a high quality to get published in a specific journal. Dr. Shackman has talked about different journal rankings. It's very important to realize that for the top ranked journals, the expectations are very high. So it's very likely to get 3 or more rounds of reviews to finally get a paper accepted and published in those top journals. And when you think about how to publish your dissertation after you finish your doctoral degrees. I would suggest the first step is to present your papers or your dissertations in a conference, because usually the conference has relatively lower requirement than journals. And when you are going to the conference, you get some feedback from other scholars in the field, as Dr. Guzman has discussed previously. So it's very good to submit your dissertation to a conference first. Then you can refine the paper and target it to a journal later. And also it's very important when you submit your papers to a conference and a journal, you need to make sure you meet the requirement of each conference and a journal, because each conference and each journal has slightly different requirement, not just the scope of the journals, the subject of the journals, but also like structures, the citation format. So it's very important to first understand the requirement for the manuscript by each journal and each conference, and develop your papers accordingly. And also it's very important to find a right conference or journal for your dissertation. You have to find a journal or conference that match the topic or subject matter explored in your dissertation. Different journals or conferences have different focus or scope. So if you are working on some paper looking at the marketing strategies, it's not appropriate to submit the manuscript to some journals on consumer behaviors. When you identify a specific journals, it's also very important to browse the publications in that journals and identify relevant literature from that specific journals, and cite those articles in your paper to show that you have built a collection between your research project, your research studies, and the literatures in that specific journal. It's also important to refer to published articles in a journal or conference as a template, so that you can see how the paper are structured in that journal, and so how you can write your papers accordingly. It's a time-consuming process to get the dissertation published in a journal, but it is worthwhile to put extra effort to get your dissertation published, especially if you have your career planned to teach at some universities. Next, Dr. Guzman will talk about other issues regarding the publications.
Thank you so much.
If you have any questions, yeah, feel free to ask at the end of the webinar.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you very much, Dr. San, and thank you very much, Dr. Shackman. To finish the presentation, I'm just going to discuss the topic of the authorship. it's very important to discuss authorship as well. As you probably have seen, academic publications are rarely published with one author, solo author. They are usually have several authors, 2, 3, 4, and it all depends on the intellectual contribution from the authors. Research work that comes out of a dissertation usually has the doctoral student as the first author unless otherwise agreed. Again, it all depends on the contribution, and it's an important discussion that is better to have at the beginning. You want to recognize the contribution that others made. And something important for our doctoral programs and any doctoral program is that the committee members and even the dissertation chair usually agree to be part of the dissertation committee with the motivation to publish afterwards. Again, in academic world, publications are important, and if you are in academia, you want to work with the student, with the doctoral student, with that motivation to conduct research in that field of interest, but also with the hope that out of that work there are going to come publications. As you can see, the process requires several iterations, and usually the doctoral student works the first iteration, but when you receive more and more feedback and more improvements are needed, that's where collaboration is really important, and all the authors start making contributions to the final product. And finally, in the final slide, you have some advice about the steps to follow as you think about a publication. Remember that even though it's important that you maybe consider first a conference and then a journal and then publish different pieces of the dissertation, you cannot publish the same work more than once. That's very important ethically. Each publication should have a different emphasis and focus, and some factors that determine the differences between publications could be, again, the focus of the publication that can come from your dissertation. One could be the emphasis on the methodology, a contribution to the methodology, or the theory, or a paper that emphasizes on the practical contributions. Always the titles and the abstracts should be completely different, and the content, this is kind of like a rule of thumb. It's not written anywhere, but that's what is that a paper should be at least 30% different. If you submit it to a conference, it's important to let the journal editors know that the paper has been presented at the conference before. I mean, you don't want to go into self-plagiarism, so it's also important to cite yourself. Again, with that, we conclude the presentations, and we are going to open now to questions from the audience. Thank you very much again, Dr. Shackman and Dr. San, for your important input, and we're going to go ahead and answer questions from the audience.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Guzman, and thank you for presentations, everyone, Dr. Shackman, Dr. Sun, and Dr. Guzman. If you have any questions, please submit them now. You can find the question box. Again, it's on your control panel, right-hand side of the screen, about halfway down. Or if you're just calling in on the phone and not on the webinar, you can email your questions in to me at daniel.sloan@trident.edu. First question and I'm going to direct this to Dr. Guzman, is can I publish before I finish my dissertation?
Okay, thank you. Well, doctoral students can certainly publish before they finish dissertation, but that's something that they have to consider very carefully. I personally, and we in our program, don't encourage publications because we want students to finish the dissertation, and as you know, most of our students work full-time and have lots of things going on, and so we want them to prioritize on this dissertation first and then publish dissertation. What it's best to encourage is to publish in a conference again, to submit a conference to get feedback, because the turnaround is also shorter. So that I think a conference is more viable than a journal paper. On the other hand, we do encourage submissions to a journal when the dissertation is approved, because then they have a solid research conducted, and they are done with the dissertation. So that would be the recommendation. Now, of course, that depends on other universities. Sometimes they require them to publish as part of their dissertation. And again, if you go into an academic position, if it's a full-time PhD program, that could be a requirement. But at Trident, we again encourage and promote journal publications when the dissertation is done.
Great. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the answer, Dr. Guzman. Next question is for Dr. Shackman. You mentioned how important it is to look for reputable journals. And why would a doctoral student choose to wait several years to get published with a reputable journal when they could submit an article to a B-level journal, also reputable, and get published in a much shorter amount of time, say 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think looking at the rankings, it's not so much just an issue of finding the most prestigious journal. It's finding one that's just at your level for your needs. I often get students, my former PhD students, they kind of disappear for a few years after they graduate. Then all of a sudden they're up for tenure and they quick need a publication. So at the same time, yeah, B or C journal a lot of times is more than adequate. But it can be hard actually to find the top tier journal. Is really easy because everybody knows what they are. But when you go further down, it becomes harder and harder to distinguish between, say, a reputable C-level journal and a predatory journal. So I think it's a lot of times it's in your interest not to go to the top journal, to go to a reputable but mid-level. But it can also be harder to find, and that's where I think you really have to do your research to make sure it's a journal both that won't take you a huge amount of time to get published in, and that you have a reasonable chance of getting published in, but at the same time is reputable. And that can take a lot of research to find just the right journal, not too high ranking, but not predatory either, just right. So does that answer your question?
Let's hope. And thank you, Dr. Shackman. Next question. We actually had 2 people ask the same question. And I'm going to send this to Dr. Sun first. Can the same article be submitted for consideration to several journals at the same time?
Absolutely not. I think Dr. Guzman has talked about that in the presentation. There are at least 30% difference between the papers you submit to one journal over the other, and also the subject, the topics of the paper should be different too. You may develop different papers out of the same research project, but the topics should be different. You cannot submit exactly same topics, same content to multiple journals at the same time. That's the ethical issues I have mentioned in the peer review process. It's not acceptable practice in academia.
And is that something that can ruin a researcher's reputation?
Yes, because if you submit the same paper to like 2 different journals at the same time, maybe the same reviewers will review the same paper for different journals. Even so, this kind of practice has been identified by the reviewers or by the editors or by other readers. So that's the unethical practice in academia. So I would suggest that we avoid this kind of practice in our publication practice.
Great. Thank you for the answer and the advice, Dr. Sun. Next question. This one is for Dr. Guzman. At what point in terms of time is it too late to use dissertation research in order to create a journal article?
It really depends on the topic and the data. You know, if the topic is not current anymore, like for example, how important is the use of email? You know, that was an interesting question many years ago when people just started using email, but now it's not as relevant anymore. So it really depends on the topic. Of course, the literature review will have to be updated to be published. Like if this is a research that hasn't been published for many years, the literature review needs to be updated. It will depend on the topic, but also on the data. Because again, if the data is about a topic that is not relevant anymore, then data can get old and can be irrelevant. Because remember that it's all about a contribution to knowledge. So if we want to contribute, we want to contribute to something that we don't know, that the peers don't know yet, and we are all learning. But it's something that it's already very obvious and doesn't make a contribution, then it's too late.
Thank you, Dr. Guzman. Next question, I'm gonna send this one to Dr. Shackman. Should one's dissertation match the career research plan?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I understand the could you repeat that question?
Yeah, the question is, should the dissertation match the career research plan? And the person who asked that, would you mind clarifying that question? And we'll circle back to that. Dr. Guzman, this question is for you. Is it appropriate to include all committee members even if they changed prior to the defense?
What the student needs to consider is the contribution, you know, the intellectual contribution that every committee member made to the research. So if you feel that one of the committee members, even if it's a former committee member, has made important contributions to your research, and then you are free to consider this person as co-author, but you should always consult with the person. I mean, nobody should become an author without knowing, right? So it's very important to consult with the person if he or she agrees to be part of the research and co-author the paper.
Thank you, Dr. Guzman. Next question, this is for Dr. Sun. What advice do you have for students who are interested in doing research with Trident faculty members?
This is a very good question. I think the most important thing is to find faculty whose research interests match the research topics in the dissertation. So it's very important to have committee members or chair who are knowledgeable in that field in order to provide candid and constructive feedback to improve the work, and also who can share his or her own experience, publication experience with the student to help them to better understand the process to go through the dissertation, and also to go through the peer review process to get the work published in a conference or a journal. I hope this answered the question.
Thank you, Dr. Sun. And if I'm not mistaken, all three of you have done a fair amount of research with students or former students, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but usually after they've graduated. Sometimes we do a conference paper before they get their PhD, but usually it's after they finish their dissertation that we've worked with them to publish their dissertation research.
Great. And Dr. Shackman, I got some clarification on that question from earlier. Woman states that she's researching volunteer management using FEMA ISC training in the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary and other first responder organizations. Her career research might lean toward education using assistive technology. Is it smarter to plan a series of articles on my dissertation topic in reference to her career plan?
It definitely can't hurt. I mean, publishing in a specific area gives you some credibility above and beyond your dissertation. You know, it establishes you know, a lot of credibility. But you know, I think you also it definitely want to consider your career plan. On the other hand, you know, it's something you have to work out with your chair, with your committee, holistically. It should be your career plan, but also some pragmatic issues like what kind of data do you have access to? You know, what kind of expertise does your committee member, do they have? Because you know, the most important thing about your dissertation is to complete it. Whether the exact topic is the exact match for your career choice probably comes second, but that's really something, you know, you should consult carefully with your committee.
Thank you, Dr. Shackman. And this looks like it is our last question, and I'm going to send this to Dr. Guzman. And our attendee is asking, can we pretty much depend on journals we find on search engines like EBSCO and ProQuest who provide researchers and academic scholars reputable studies and articles as reputable sources to apply for our own article submissions? Let me know if you'd like me to repeat that.
Well, I think the question is about if the library databases that we have access to are enough to give us a good background to publish in journals.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Well, this could be an entire topic, but the digital libraries, you know, the databases have subscriptions to different journals. Of course, those that are most cited are in the most popular databases. Our university, Trident University, has a pretty good subscription to the most important databases that have subscriptions to the most relevant journals. So it's a chain, you know, it's not that our librarian subscriptions, they are usually to databases, and databases subscribe to the most popular journals that are the ones that are most cited and everything. So it's a chain, you know, the more prestigious journal has, the more citations it has, the higher it's the index, the impact factor, and therefore it's going to be available in the most popular databases. Particularly, Trident University has very good access to the most popular databases, so we do have access to the most reputable academic journals, given that we have, you know, 4 doctoral programs. So in that sense, it would help. And we also have, you know, if you don't find a good journal article, we have the interlibrary loan. So in that sense, Trident University has covered, would be covered. Now, other universities, again, it would depend on the type of library access and databases that they have.
Thank you, Dr. Guzman. And that concludes our Q&A session. Thank you, everyone, for the great questions and the participation. And I'm going to pass things off back to Dr. Guzman.
Okay, well, I would like to thank everyone for attending and participating in today's C.O.R.E webinar, Publishing in the Academic World. We will be sending you a link to the recording of today's session and the slide deck later this week. If you would like to reach out to either of today's presenters or myself, our contact information is in the screen now. And please remember that to join future C.O.R.E webinars. Very soon there will be announcements about our next C.O.R.E webinars that will be hosted by Dr. Heidi Gilligan, the Dean of the College of Education, and we hope to see you there. Thank you again, and goodbye, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.